You're done here. I couldn't immediately grasp the meaning of her words, and I froze. Out of a small kindness, I'll give you a little time. But you no longer have a place here. My mother-in-law coldly declared. What on earth do you mean? I asked in confusion, and she made an unbelievable confession with a sneer. The eldest son and his wife are moving back in for the birth of their child. So, you need to be out by the end of the week. You've got to be kidding me. This is my and Richard's home. The anger I had been holding back exploded. There's no way Richard would allow that. My name is Hillary, a 27-year-old housewife. I work from home as a freelance graphic designer. In this day and age, as long as you have internet access and the necessary equipment, you can work from anywhere, which I am truly grateful for. However, my parents don't understand this kind of work, and they still don't recognize it as a legitimate job, looking down on me. That's why I always felt uncomfortable at my parents' home. One day, I met my current husband, Richard Takagi, through a friend's introduction. He is an architectural designer, and we both share a passion for design, which sparked engaging conversations. As we talked deeply about our work and personal lives, we grew closer. We began to respect and take an interest in each other, and eventually, those feelings developed beyond mere friendship. Initially, we were just friends, but gradually we became indispensable to each other. Eventually, we started dating, and as our relationship deepened, I began to seriously think about my future with Richard. A year and a half after we started dating, he surprised me with a proposal. It was at a campsite on a mountain, where he had reserved a small pavilion he had designed himself. As the sun set, he knelt down and said, "Spending time with you, Hillary, is my greatest happiness. I want you to stay by my side forever. Will you marry me?" He handed me a ring. Moved by his serious gaze and warm words, I tearfully said, yes. We then vowed to build a happy life together and began our newlywed life. Our married life was very happy and enjoyable. We both worked, but since I worked from home, I took on most of the household chores. Even so, on his days off or when he finished work early, Richard would help with the chores. Supporting each other, we enjoyed happy days together. But that didn't mean there were no problems. "Mom, what's going on? Why are you calling so late?" One late weeknight, just as Richard and I were about to go to bed, his smartphone rang. It was my mother-in-law, Richard's mother. Richard had been chatting happily with me, but his expression changed when he saw who was calling. I had met my mother-in-law several times, but she looked down on me and despised me. I raised my children on my own. "You can't compare to someone like me," she openly declared. She didn't recognize my work as a job and wouldn't listen to my explanations. "I don't know what you do, but if you work from home, it can't be that important," she said dismissively. Richard explained that she accepted our marriage only because his older brother was already married. He painfully smiled, saying that his mother only acknowledged what suited her. It was clear that Richard didn't hold his mother in high regard. So, when she suddenly called, I had a bad feeling. "Mom wants to move in with us." "What? What do you mean?" Richard looked troubled as he explained after hanging up the phone, and I raised my voice in surprise. "It seems the family home is deteriorating to the point where she can't live there anymore. She wants to find a new place to live. Then she should find a new place to live on her own," I suggested, but Richard had a complicated expression. "Mom wants to take this opportunity to move into an apartment with us. That's probably her real motive." "What?" Currently, we were living in the apartment I had rented since before we got married. And we had been planning to move into a new apartment for some time. Apparently, my mother-in-law remembered this. However, we hadn't yet decided on a specific property. Seeing my confusion, Richard said, "It seems Mom's savings are running low, so she's probably relying on me." Richard's parents divorced when he was in elementary school. The cause was his father's infidelity, and as a result of the divorce, his mother received a substantial alimony, child support, and even the house. Richard and his brother Kent's father was a successful businessman, so the amount paid was quite large. Because of this, my mother-in-law barely needed to work. But couldn't your mom live with your brother and his family? Well, Catherine is pregnant. Catherine is Kent's wife. Kent, who works for a foreign company, often goes on business trips. Catherine is close to my mother-in-law and spoke to her more than I did at our wedding. Normally, they would rely on Kent and Catherine, but due to the pregnancy, that was deemed difficult. Richard sighed and said that they would likely move in with Kent once things settled down. Mom still thinks she can control us however she wants. Richard didn't like the idea but was too kind to outright refuse his mother. So, Hillary, I'm sorry, but could you live with Mom for a while? I'll make sure she understands it's only until she finds her own place or moves in with my brother. I'll even get her to sign an agreement if needed. I'm just worried because I'll be away on a business trip soon. Though not as frequently as his brother, Richard also occasionally had to go on business trips. Unfortunately, he will be away for about a month soon. I didn't want to cause Richard any trouble, so I said, "It's okay, I'll manage during that time. But Hillary, you have your important work too. Don't worry, I'll handle everything. Just focus on coming back safely." I gave a peace sign to assure him, and Richard bowed his head in gratitude. Thus, we started living with my mother-in-law for a while. We set rules for cohabitation and even drafted a written agreement. We already had several apartment options, so the decision was surprisingly quick. Originally, we were looking for a family-friendly apartment for the future, but living with my mother-in-law wasn't part of the plan. Oh, what a lovely place. As expected of Richard. Such good taste. A few days after the move, my mother-in-law came to the new apartment. The land and house she previously lived on had lost value, so she transferred them to Richard. The house was old, and the area was in decline, so it was understandable that she didn't want to maintain it. Richard repeatedly checked if she was okay with it, but she seemed to have no regrets. Richard repeatedly checked if she was okay with it, but she seemed to have no regrets. Most of the belongings from the old house were disposed of. She probably intended to leave anything valuable to Kent and his family. My mother-in-law had always favored Kent, giving him many responsibilities, but this was different. Richard had also endured a lot. Despite generally relying on Kent, she turned to Richard in times of trouble, which likely didn't sit well with him. Her earlier compliments were just convenient praises. The one you should praise is Hillary. I bore most of the expenses related to the new apartment. This was Richard's suggestion. He hoped that by contributing financially for a while, my mother-in-law might change her attitude. Richard promised to pay me back later, but I opposed that. Yet, Richard's plan seemed ineffective. "Richard, you're too modest. There's no need to flatter your wife like that." My mother-in-law made sarcastic remarks and gave me condescending looks. It seemed she didn't believe Richard's words. Richard sighed in exasperation at his mother. Our life together began, but it was more difficult than I had imagined. My mother-in-law's torment was especially harsh during the day when Richard was away. She seemed to be waiting for any opportunity to criticize my every move. From morning till night, her harsh gaze was fixed on me. "Your knife skills are terrible. Why don't you take a cooking class?" She said this while I was preparing breakfast. Watching my cooking closely, she added, "It's frustrating to watch you. There's no nutrition in such cooking." She was the same way about cleaning. When I was vacuuming the living room, she pointed out tiny bits of dust and said, "Look at this, there's still so much dirt. Your cleaning is only on the surface. A wife should pay attention to every corner." One afternoon, she suddenly came into the living room and saw me taking a short break, and she made a snide remark. "Already taking a break? Is your work done? There's still so much to do." She then started listing all the small chores I had yet to do. "If you don't do this and that, the house will be a mess. What will Richard say when he comes home? It's only a matter of time before you're thrown out." She started it again. Meal times were no better. "What's this? I've never had something so salty. Richard doesn't like this flavor. Have you even bothered to learn his tastes? She constantly criticized my cooking. When I was cleaning up after meals, she would harshly comment on how I stacked the dishes, saying, "What's with this sloppy stacking? What if you break something important?" Thus, my mother-in-law tried to control me and continuously criticized my household skills while Richard was away. I had no choice but to endure it silently. No matter what I did, she was never satisfied. To make matters worse, she frequently insisted on going shopping with me, and I had to cover all the expenses. Though each shopping trip didn't cost a fortune, the expenses piled up over time. Having to pay for everything irritated me to no end. Being constantly ordered around by my mother-in-law was starting to affect my work from home. I wanted to tell Richard about his mother's outrageous behavior, but he was so busy preparing for his trip that I didn't want to bother him, so I remained silent. If it had been only my mother-in-law, I might have been able to endure, but she wasn't the only problem. "Well, this place is quite nice." Richard's brother Kent's wife, Catherine, also visited our apartment several times, and she too treated me with disdain and bossed me around. "Do you have a problem with that? I'm pregnant and can't move much. If you make a pregnant woman work, I'll expose you as a bad wife online." If I showed any resistance, Catherine would threaten me, using her pregnancy as a shield. Wanting to avoid any stress on the baby, I suppressed my anger, which only made Catherine more demanding. She would call me over for trivial tasks like fetching the TV remote or opening a bag of snacks while I was working. Both my mother-in-law and Catherine seemed to enjoy treating me like a maid. Having such a handy maid is a real help. Not that convenient. She can't even shop properly. Just buying the wrong snacks once earned me this kind of treatment. I was mentally exhausted from the constant interruptions to my work. But isn't it a waste to let her go? It's fine. Once we get the place, someone that useless. I overheard such conversations but couldn't say anything and just endured each day. As Richard's departure for his trip approached, he asked if I was okay, and I replied, "Yeah, I'll manage somehow," but inside, I had little confidence or composure left. Still, I forced a smile, wanting him to feel confident. "I'll call you if anything happens. Don't worry about me, just take care of yourself at work." I acted tough and saw him off. Richard left, patting my shoulder to cheer me up. Even in his absence, my duties remained unchanged. I told myself I would get through this while Richard was away. However, once he left for his business trip, my mother-in-law's behavior worsened. "Hurry up and make me some tea, you worthless wife." She began ordering me around with even harsher language. She stopped calling me by my name, treating me like a household servant. Enjoying herself, Catherine also visited every few days, joining my mother-in-law in belittling me. Every time she came, her belongings seemed to accumulate in our apartment, making it feel less and less like my home. The anxiety made it difficult to sleep at night. Despite the pressure, I couldn't neglect my work. One day, while struggling to meet a deadline, I went to the kitchen in the early afternoon and found my mother-in-law standing there, smiling. "You're done here." I froze, unable to immediately comprehend her words. "I'll give you a little time out of pity. But you no longer have a place here," she coldly declared. "What on earth do you mean?" I asked in confusion, and she sneered as she revealed an unbelievable truth. "My eldest son and his wife are moving back in to have their baby. So, you need to be out by the end of the week." The shock cleared my exhaustion in an instant. Moving back in for childbirth? What was she talking about? This was my and Richard's home. The anger I had been holding back exploded. "Richard would never allow this," I retorted, but she continued to sneer at me. "Maybe not. But you're the only one who has to leave." Her words were gentle, but their meaning was cold and cruel. "You make the house feel cramped. So, if you leave, everything will be fine." "What are you talking about?" I asked, unable to hide my agitation. "Richard is my son, so he can stay." But I don't consider you family. That's why I've been making things unpleasant for you, to make you leave." In that moment, I understood everything. All her harassment had been a plan to drive me out. She seriously intended to kick me out and take over the apartment for her own convenience. Even though I was the one paying $6,000 in rent, I thought bitterly to myself. Despite all the discussions I had with Richard, his mother still didn't believe it. "It's no use talking to Richard. In the end, he'll side with me," she said coldly. Is that really the case? I had lost the strength to argue. The harassment from my mother-in-law had pushed me to the edge. Yet, she mercilessly told me to prepare to leave within a week. I was left stunned, overcome with sadness, unable to do anything. As evening approached, I felt restless, unable to focus on anything. My heart felt frozen, weighed down by the heavy rain of sorrow. I didn't know what to do and just sat there. Then my phone rang. Richard's name appeared on the screen. With a flood of emotions, I answered immediately, just wanting to hear his voice. "Hillary, I'm sorry I couldn't call you sooner." "Richard." Hearing his voice, my tears wouldn't stop. I wanted to tell him everything, but at that moment, all I could do was cry. Richard sensed something was wrong and spoke seriously. "Did something happen? Did my mom do something to you?" I couldn't say anything, but Richard understood my situation. "Hillary, please don't hold back. Tell me everything. I know you're worried about me, but it's pointless if it's hurting you." Richard's kind words gave me strength, and I told him everything. "I see. Hillary, I'm so sorry. I had no idea you were going through so much pain." Richard apologized repeatedly. "It's okay. I should have relied on you more. I tried to handle everything myself. Thank you. But because of you, I might be able to come home sooner." "What? But you said it would take a month." I said, and he chuckled. "Hillary, knowing you were struggling made me push myself harder. I overdid it a bit." Hearing his embarrassed voice, warmth returned to my heart. And a junior colleague offered to take over the rest. "So, I'll be home soon." "About my mom." Richard lowered his voice. "I never thought she'd go this far." "Hillary, don't hold back anymore." "Really?" I asked anxiously. "Yes, don't hesitate. Stand up to her with all you've got," Richard said firmly. His words gave me the confidence to be strong. Richard was undoubtedly on my side. With that clear fact, I had nothing to fear. We discussed our next steps. If she wanted me to leave, I'd leave, just as she said. That night, I slept soundly for the first time in a while. The next morning, feeling refreshed, I moved forward with the plan over the phone. "Yes, remove every single piece of furniture and appliance. You're noisy on the phone since morning," Catherine said irritably as she entered the living room. I was so engrossed in my conversation with Richard last night that I hadn't noticed she had come over. The timing was perfect. "Catherine, everything here is yours, right?" "Yeah, so what?" "It's in the way, so I'm going to clean it up for now." With that, I left the room. Ignoring Catherine's indifferent reply, I started packing her belongings into the prepared cardboard boxes one by one. It was as if I had saved the moving boxes from my previous move just for this occasion. Thinking that, I hurriedly packed Catherine's stuff. I handled them a bit roughly, but it couldn't be helped as I was in a rush. "Hey, what are you doing? Are you crazy since this morning?" My mother-in-law appeared and threw provocative words at me, but I didn't care anymore. "No, I'm not doing anything strange. Since I was told to leave, I'm preparing to leave." "What? What's that supposed to mean?" She tilted her head in confusion, and just then, the doorbell rang. I answered yes and went to the door, where several sturdy movers stood. Outside, there were 2 trucks parked. "All right, please go ahead," I said, and they responded cheerfully. I was impressed by their brightness despite the sudden request. While I was moved by their cheerfulness, the movers took out most of the stuff from the room. Are you sure it's really everything? Yes, as we discussed, please take all the furniture and appliances. Hey, what are you saying? What are you doing? How can you just take the furniture and appliances without permission? It's like stealing. My mother-in-law was confused, but I explained boldly. Don't worry. All the furniture and appliances here are mine, so there's no problem if I take my belongings, right? The movers, convinced by my confident words, continued their work. As the room gradually emptied, I felt a sense of relief. In contrast, my mother-in-law and Catherine were completely stunned. Oh well, I feel like a fool for holding back all this time. What do you mean by that? My mother-in-law half shouted, but I calmly replied, I told you earlier, didn't I? Have you already forgotten? I replied calmly. Seeing her gape in surprise made me chuckle. I'm just leaving because you told me to. That's why I'm having the movers take the stuff. That's all. She should be grateful that I left behind the clothes and items she bought. I'll discuss the details later with Richard involved. Leaving those words, I calmly left the apartment. I heard some noise behind me, probably just them arguing. The movers have temporarily stored my belongings. Regarding the next place to live, I've found a few options, but I plan to make the final decision with Richard. A few days later, on Sunday, we gathered again in the now completely empty apartment. Richard had returned from his business trip, and my mother-in-law, Catherine, and Kent were also there. It had been a while since I'd seen Kent, but he seemed a bit down as well. With no furniture, we spread out thin cushions and sat down. In the middle, a small folding table was placed. Apologize, my mother-in-law was the first to speak. She glared at me, and Catherine wore a similar expression beside her. Apologize? For what? For all your ridiculous actions, of course. My mother-in-law, perhaps due to the prolonged inconvenience, hit the floor hard and revealed her anger. How dare you take Richard's apartment and furniture without permission? But I wasn't intimidated by my mother-in-law. Richard looked sad, but I gave him an encouraging look. Richard steeled himself and faced his mother. Mom, I've told you many times. All that furniture and appliances were bought by Hillary. And Hillary has been paying the $7,000 rent here. Richard, it makes me sad. How did you become a child who lies like this? My mother-in-law feigned sorrow, but of course, there wasn't a single tear. It was obviously a cheap act. It's not a lie. It's the truth. Hillary is paying for it. You're still saying that. How could this woman have that kind of money? Then look at this bank book. And what my husband showed was my bank book. My mother-in-law took it with a suspicious look, checked the inside, and her eyes widened. What is this? Over $200,000 in savings. Really? Catherine, unable to hide her surprise, said with a blink. Richard spoke to the two of them. Mom, Catherine, it seems you haven't been listening to Hillary properly, so let me explain again. Hillary is a professional graphic designer. She receives design requests from various clients, ranging from individuals to companies every day. In fact, her designs are highly regarded, and she's involved in major advertising campaigns and visual designs for well-known brands. She started with small jobs, but now she's in high demand in the market. She has been saving diligently, and her savings have grown without her even realizing it. Richard recognized my talent and supported me, which has led to my current career. Whenever I thank him, he always says, "It's nothing," and looks embarrassed. Richard is truly kind, humble, and a good person. So, once again, Hillary has paid for everything in this apartment with her own money. Richard emphasized this, explaining to my mother-in-law and Catherine. If you had explained this earlier, my mother-in-law said, and Catherine added, so that's how it was. Hillary, let's get along better from now on. Internally, I was astonished at how quickly my mother-in-law and Catherine's attitudes changed, but I found it amusing and had to hold back my laughter. At that moment, Richard's serious voice echoed in the room again. Earlier, Mom, you told Hillary to apologize. Well, I have something to say to you too. Richard took out a piece of paper from a clear file and showed it to his mother. This is the pledge you signed when you moved into this house. What is that? She asked. Don't play dumb. I had you check the contents multiple times before signing. Don't you remember? It's about respecting the rules in each other, and other minor matters that shouldn't be an issue if you're living normally. Richard spoke quietly, but his mother looked confused and her gaze wandered. It was clear she had forgotten the contents. Seeing this, Richard continued, though disappointed. This document states that the room and furniture are Hillary's property, and if they are intentionally damaged or their rights infringed, there would be consequences. Even though I was aware of this, I needed to reconfirm the contents. Everything in it was something that should be adhered to as a matter of course. I never heard about that. That's why I told you to check it properly. Richard was worried about me and had thought of this just in case. But his mother had betrayed that expectation. When she declared a few days ago that she would kick us out, I was so shaken that I couldn't immediately recall this pledge. Don't be ridiculous. This pledge is a legally binding document created through proper procedures. I should have explained that clearly. At those words, Richard's mother began to tremble. Therefore, this applies to the current situation as well. From this month, the ownership and payment for this house will be transferred to you, Mom. That's only fair. Richard stated firmly. Even though the movers were careful during the move, some damage might have occurred during this uproar. Holding Mom responsible for that would be the best course of action. From now on, we won't take care of you anymore. Is that okay? That's fine. Whatever. Right, Catherine? Yes, that's right. As long as we keep paying. My mother-in-law and Catherine responded, looking at each other. They seemed obsessed with living in this apartment. I could understand since the location and interior were attractive, but I was curious about what Kent thought. You think so too, right, Kent? Catherine asked Kent, but he shook his head. Sorry, but I won't pay. I've been thinking about it for a while, and I've made up my mind. Kent said quietly. What are you talking about? My mother-in-law retorted, and Catherine added, yes, you should just follow along. Kent's resigned expression showed how much pressure he had felt from these two's aggressive attitudes. I didn't know how Kent usually dealt with them, but now he seemed to have given up. With that same expression, Kent took out an envelope from his bag and handed it to Catherine. Catherine, puzzled, opened the envelope and gasped loudly. What? Why? She was at a loss for words. The contents slipped out, and a bundle of photos emerged from the envelope. We picked up a few and were shocked by what we saw. They were proof of Catherine's affair, showing her entering a love hotel and kissing an unknown man. Kent began to speak quietly. I wasn't home much, so the timing of Catherine's pregnancy was a bit off. And besides, the frequency was low enough to be suspicious. There could be some mistakes. Catherine tried to defend herself, but Kent continued, ignoring her. That's why I'm divorcing you. Whether you stay here or not, discuss it with Mom. No way. And Mom, I won't take care of you anymore either. Live freely from now on. Kent firmly declared this. In response to Kent's words, my mother-in-law became furious. What are you saying? Both Richard and Kent, it is your duty to take care of me, she insisted, but Kent seemed to have had enough. I've always been told to be this way, to do this and that. I'm fed up. All your imposing words are just for your own convenience, he shouted through tears. My mother-in-law choked on her words, and everyone was left speechless. The commotion that started in this apartment ended quietly like this. After that, Kent and Catherine divorced. Catherine insisted on her innocence until the end, but a DNA test of the child revealed the truth, and she had to pay alimony. Catherine sought support from her parents, but they rejected her as a family disgrace and even disowned her. As a result, she now works day and night to pay the alimony to Kent. For Catherine, who came from a wealthy family, This life is tough, and she was hospitalized once due to overwork. The only consolation is that her child is being raised by her parents. I hope the child grows up straight without turning out like her. As for Kent, I heard that his life hasn't changed much and that he continues to live as before. He has visited us a few times to apologize for causing trouble with his helplessness and to express his gratitude. When asked why he revealed the truth at that timing, he said it was because he was inspired by my actions. Seeing me, an outsider, stand up to my mother-in-law made him wonder what he was doing. Although my actions were driven by Richard's encouragement, and my feelings are complex, if it gave Kent a chance to break free from his oppressive environment, then it was worth it. As for my mother-in-law, she lived in that apartment for a while, but since she couldn't pay the rent alone, she was evicted within a month. Unable to rely on us or Kent, I heard she eventually became homeless. I saw her from a distance once, and her clothes were terribly dirty, and she was emaciated. The figure who had hurled curses at me was unrecognizable. I have nothing to say to her, but thinking about Richard and the others, I hope she reflects on her life, even a little. We have moved to a new apartment and started a new life. The costs incurred from this commotion were significant, but they were quickly recovered. In fact, the land and house that Richard inherited from his mother sold for a high price. Apparently, my mother-in-law hadn't researched in advance, but the area was slated for redevelopment, and the land's value was high. Since the house could be used again with a little investment for remodeling, we sold it with that prospect, resulting in a significant profit. Thanks to that, we are now enjoying our married life again. This whole incident made me realize once again that I am married to a wonderful person. And it was revealed that I am pregnant. While sharing the joy of having a child with Richard, we are now eagerly awaiting the birth of our baby. I believe that with him, we can definitely build a warm and happy family. When I returned from my trip, I found my house had burned down. Though Dan was rescued from the second floor, he suffered severe burns all over his body. At the hospital we rushed to, Dan was wrapped in bandages all over his body, lying in bed. As I shed tears, Rachel lashed out at me with harsh words. "You must be secretly thrilled inside, right? You can rebuild the house with insurance, and you're safe and sound." I couldn't believe my ears. Because, compared to everyone else's stylish homes, I thought ours was an embarrassment. See, it's better off burned down. Rachel's laughter echoed through the hospital room, filled with the smell of disinfectant. I glared at Rachel's smug profile with all the anger I could muster. "I know you're the one who set the fire. I will never forgive you. Just you wait, I'll make you regret this." I'm Kelly, a 63-year-old housewife. While managing the accounting for the small factory my husband left behind, I lead a busy yet fulfilling life. My son, Dan, lives in the same city with his wife, Rachel, and their daughter, Anna, visiting me during long holidays. Rachel, my daughter-in-law, has been kind to me, especially after losing my husband last year. Dan, who left home after high school in defiance of his father's wishes to take over the factory, seemed to have been job hopping for a while. Rachel, who met Dan at the restaurant where they worked, watched over him warmly. When they decided to get married, I was full of gratitude for her marrying my less-than-perfect eldest son. Anna is a beauty like her mother and mature beyond her 9 years. We have fun baking cookies and chatting whenever she comes to visit on my days off. I intended to keep a good distance with my son's family. That's when Dan, who rarely calls, suggested they move in with me. "It must be lonely on your own, why don't we live together?" "I appreciate the offer, but I'm not interested in living together." "Don't be so stubborn. Having us and Anna around will help you feel less lonely." "I'm not lonely at all." "So, we're moving in with you next month." I said I'm not interested in living together. Despite my refusal, my son's family moved in the following month. Well, living with my cute granddaughter and kind daughter-in-law isn't too bad. But soon, I was shocked to discover Rachel's true nature. "I'm home." As I opened the front door, there stood Rachel, as always, standing imposingly in the entrance. She presented me with a speck of dust she had picked up with her fingertips, accusing me in a shrill voice. There was dust in the corner of the stairs. I rushed to clean before work, so I must have missed some trash. Then you should wake up earlier. I can't invite my mom's friends over to such a shabby and dirty house. I was infuriated. Then she, a full-time homemaker, should do the cleaning herself. Besides, although the exterior is a 30-year-old wooden two-story building, we renovated the interior 5 years ago, so there's nothing uncomfortable about living here. Rachel, I'm working, and just preparing meals for 4 is tough enough. As we agreed when you moved in, I need help with cleaning and laundry. Rachel's eyes narrowed at my words. Huh? This is your house, so it's only natural that you do everything. Don't blame me just because you can't handle it. I lost the will to argue and fell silent. I thought she was a quiet and lovely lady, but she was completely pretending. The next day, as I was about to open the gate to my home, I felt a strong gaze on my back. Turning around, I saw Camila from the neighborhood, staring at me with an eco bag in hand. After I greeted her, Camila frowned. People aren't always what they seem. I never thought you'd be the type to bully your daughter-in-law. Camila spoke with a tone of sympathy. Rachel has been crying and telling everyone how you don't feed her properly, and how she gets scolded if she doesn't keep the house spotless every day, and how disgraceful it is for a daughter-in-law to work, and that you've even stopped her from working? I haven't said any of those things. Camila looked at my face skeptically. Well, I believe you, Kelly, but squashing rumors is gonna be tough. It's even reached the neighborhood association president, you know? That explains why lately, the folks I bump into at the supermarket or on the street have been acting all weird around me. The moment we make eye contact, they scurry off, or groups suddenly disband. Probably, this gossip monger, Camila, spread the word for kicks. Watching her leave, I entered my house with a heavy heart. We had agreed before moving in together that utility bills and groceries would be split between our families. Yet, 6 months into living together, my son Dan and his wife Rachel hadn't paid their share of the living expenses. Even when I asked Rachel for payment on Dan's payday, she always had an excuse to stall. Rachel, I sent you the breakdown of the living expenses a week ago on your cell, didn't I? Oh, I forgot to withdraw the money. I'll pay later, so could you cover for me in the meantime? And just like that, another month would pass without them paying. After 6 months of this pattern, I finally confronted Dan. I've been covering for you for half a year now. Dan, have you actually been giving Rachel the money? Geez, she said she's gonna pay later, so she will. We're rich, so stop being so petty. I couldn't help but retort to my son's grudging reply. Sure, we have your father's inheritance, and I'm still working, so we could manage without your contribution. But that's not the point. It's about responsibility. If Rachel can't pay, she should at least explain why to me. What a nagging old lady. What did you just say? Just got back. Anna's voice from coming home from her lessons put a pause to our argument. Dan greeted Anna and went to take a shower, bringing our skirmish to a temporary halt. But the issues didn't end there. Shortly after moving in, Rachel began dressing up and going out on weekend nights, making Anna and me promise to keep it a secret from Dan. On weekends, Dan would be out drinking late with his colleagues, thinking if he got home before Rachel, he wouldn't find out. Honestly, if they have money for that, they should pay their living expenses first. One evening, while peeling potatoes in a gloomy mood after Rachel had left, Anna, washing the potatoes, murmured, Mom's not planning to pay for the utilities or groceries, I think. I stopped peeling. You heard the conversation with your dad the other day? Yeah, it was audible all the way to the parking lot. Anna said matter-of-factly. Before moving, I overheard Mom and Dad saying, now that the annoying grandpa is gone, let's push into Grandma's place. If we live with her, we save on our rent, get meals prepared, and have the utilities paid for us. We can enjoy the savings. Was their plan from the start to make me pay for everything? Anger slowly rose within me. Do they think of me as some sort of ATM come housemaid? And Mom can't do housework at all. When we were in the house, meals were just pastries or fast food, and she hardly cleaned. The only thing she really did was laundry, so don't expect too much, Grandma. Got it, Anna dear. Thanks for telling me, I said with a forced smile and resumed peeling potatoes. To hear such words from my granddaughter, what a pitiful mother I must be. I felt a little sorry for Rachel. On Friday night, unusually cheerful, Rachel struck up a conversation. Kelly, do you have plans this Saturday? I quickly thought back. Last month, when I honestly answered a similar question, Rachel got furious. Trip? If you have that kind of leisure, give Anna some allowance instead. You're so thoughtless. I didn't want to hear that from someone who doesn't pay their living expenses. So I decided to hide the truth this time. I plan to relax at home. Oh, I see. If you do go out, make sure to tell me. I have plans too. Plans? I felt uneasy. Perhaps I should inform her about the trip afterward. After Rachel left, Anna came over with a bursting smile. Next Saturday, Mom and Dad are gonna take me shopping for clothes. It's been so long since we all went to the mall together, I'm excited. Her innocent smile made me smile too. That's wonderful. I hope you find some cute clothes. Yeah, I'll show them to you when we get back. I felt relieved. I've been worried about Anna, who, despite being mature for her age, seemed to lack the joyfulness of childhood. Seeing Anna's joy while shopping with her parents was truly heartwarming. And then came Saturday. After Dan's family left, I too left the house. It was a day trip to a beachside spa. At a wonderful hotel, I enjoyed a lunch filled with seafood delights. I felt all my accumulated stress melt away. Stepping off the train, I made my way home with a light step. As I walked along the night road, I saw a crowd from afar near my house. Beyond them, police cars and fire engines were parked, yellow tape was stretched out, and several firefighters and police officers stood around. Smelling smoke, I realized there had been a fire nearby. I wondered if everyone in the house was safe. As I walked on, lost in thought, Camila stopped me with a surprised look. Kelly? Weren't you at home? I went on a trip. Then, was that Dan who was taken away in an ambulance earlier? Dan went shopping. It seems he came back to get something and got caught in the fire. It was arson. My heart skipped a beat. Pushing through the crowd to a firefighter, I introduced myself and was led to the front of my house. I was at a loss for words at the sight before me. The traditional two-story house that stood there just this morning was nowhere to be found. All that remained was charred beams, parts of sooty walls, and what used to be furniture, now just debris. Kneeling on the sidewalk, I stared blankly at what was left of my home. A police officer approached me with hesitation. You were on a trip, right? Yes. We'd like to talk to you in more detail tomorrow. Can you give us your contact information? Without thinking, I gave him my cell phone number. Your son was involved in the fire, but fortunately, he's conscious. Do you know which hospital? No. Please tell me. The garage was spared from the fire, so my car was safe. As I looked up the hospital's direction on my cell phone, I received a call from Rachel. I heard you were seriously injured in the fire. Are you okay? I was on a trip. There was silence on the other end for a while. You were home all day today, right? I decided to go to the spa on a whim. The one taken away was Dan. Camila must have mistaken us. Dan and I have similar hairstyles and hair colors. Huh? I thought he didn't come back because we were supposed to meet at the station at 4. He must have gotten the day wrong for the arson. Huh? Never mind. Which hospital? I'll bring Anna. Rachel's nonchalant tone, as if she wasn't worried about her husband, felt off to me. Even if we didn't get along, he was her significant son. I rushed to the hospital, explained the situation at the reception, and hurried to the room. Seeing Dan lying on the bed, I couldn't help but tear up. It must have been hot and painful to get caught in a fire. Wrapped in bandages all over, he looked like a mummy. A while later, the doctor appeared and explained the treatment and hospitalization plans. Dan was seriously injured with burns all over his body, but his life was not in danger. He would need skin graft surgery using his own skin and treatment for the scars, requiring about 6 months of hospitalization. Soon after, Rachel and Anna arrived. Anna quickly teared up, stuttering Dad and kneeling beside the bed, sobbing. Next to her, Rachel glared at Dan with a terrible look. Then, suddenly turning to me across the bed, she snapped. "I told you to let me know if your plans changed. Why did you just go off? Do I need your approval to go out? Originally, it was supposed to be you lying there with severe burns. Don't you feel bad for Dan?" Blamed as if I were at fault, I couldn't agree. Then Rachel smirked maliciously. "Kelly, didn't you secretly cheer inside? With the insurance money, you can rebuild the house, and you escaped unharmed. Anyway, it's good riddance to that old shack." I couldn't believe my ears. My precious home, filled with memories of my late husband, was reduced to beams and walls by the time I returned. Could she not imagine the shock I experienced? Taken aback, Rachel went on and on. "I mean, everyone else's houses are so stylish, and ours was just an old, shabby house. Embarrassing, right? Well, it's better off burning down." "Mom, why would you say something so horrible?" "Oh, it's the truth, Anna. Moving our stuff to the hotel was the right call. We're just lucky, you know." Rachel's loud laughter echoed through the hospital room, filled with the smell of disinfectant. Unable to argue in the hospital room, I clenched my fists and gritted my teeth, holding back my anger. Then, Dan, who seemed to be sleeping, moaned. That's right, Dan was conscious, despite being wrapped in bandages all over. He slightly moved his mouth and said in a low voice, "Rachel." "What?" Rachel leaned down, bringing her ear close to Dan's mouth. After hearing Dan's whisper, Rachel's expression changed. "Got it, I'll handle it," she said, then turned to Anna and me, suggesting it was time to leave. Walking down the hallway, I pondered over the exchange between Dan and Rachel. It remained a mystery, but I caught a few words: ashes, money. In fact, I inherited gold bars as part of my husband's estate. They're stored in a bank's safety deposit box, and I hadn't told Dan their exact location. Misunderstanding that the gold was in our home safe, Dan might have sneaked out during shopping to steal it while I was away. Unaware of this, Rachel, who had taken separate actions from Anna, might have committed arson. It's a 15-minute drive from the shopping mall to our house. If Rachel planned separate activities with a set meet-up time with Anna, it would be possible for her to set the fire. The words Rachel accidentally let slip got the day wrong, and the way she excitedly called me, thinking I was caught in the fire. Plus, her anger towards me in the hospital suggests that I was her target. Dan is the beneficiary of my insurance policy. Even if I survived with burns, a significant amount of sickness benefit would be deposited into Dan's account. Feeling dizzy with shock, my body heated up with anger. Rachel, setting our house on fire for my insurance money and coolly causing Dan severe burns. Above all, using shopping with Anna as a cover for her plot, showed no shred of motherliness. My heart ached seeing Anna walking down, head hung low. Her fun shopping memories probably erased. I glared at Rachel, anger burning through me. "I know you started the fire. I will never forgive you. Just wait, you'll regret this." Considering Rachel's preparedness in moving their belongings to the hotel beforehand, it was clear she was the arsonist. Furious, but leaving the evidence gathering to the police. My next step was to find a temporary home. Before I could call, the president of my husband's factory called to check on me. After hearing my story, he immediately arranged 3 weeks of paid leave and started the process of moving me into company housing. Rachel was offered the same, but she chose to stay in a hotel with Anna, so I moved into the company housing alone, dragging my carry-on. After contacting the insurance company and buying essentials at a large supermarket, I returned home. Unpacking could wait. I microwaved a pre-made meal and ate. The moment my stomach was full, the tension broke, and exhaustion overwhelmed me. Thankful for the furnished room, I prepared the bed and fell asleep without changing. The next day was spent shopping for necessities, as everything had burned. Having my driver's license, cell phone, and credit cards was a small mercy. Sitting in the shopping center's food court, eating ice cream, I suddenly remembered the words I overheard between Dan and Rachel. On my way back to the company housing, I stopped by the remains of our house and saw Rachel, phone in hand, sifting through the ashes. Dan, you won't find the safe here. It contains the gold bars, right? Oh, Anna's piano lesson time. Yes, I can come in 4 days. I'll search again then. Hidden behind the neighbor's fence. Hearing her conversation, I was certain. They were indeed searching for the gold bars. She planned to take them without telling me. Smirking, I left, planning a grand welcome for them. 4 days later, Rachel arrived at the charred remains to find neighborhood women gossiping in a circle. Hello, Camila, Nancy, Lisa. She greeted me in her sweet voice. They all frowned at her turn. Camila, with a grim face, spoke up. We heard about the fire. You're the arsonist, Rachel? What? Fooled by your quiet appearance. Planning to burn your husband and claim the insurance money, were you? How scary. You knew Dan was there and still set the fire? What's the police doing? Instead of letting criminals roam free, they should lock you up. Faced with their glares, Rachel was flustered. Thanks to always being charming and playing the role of the poor daughter-in-law bullied by her mother-in-law, Rachel had won over the residents, who suddenly turned against her. I wasn't trying to kill Dan. Rachel's voice faded to a whisper, and I chimed in from the shadows. No, that's not it. Kelly? The real target was me. You set the fire thinking I was in the house. Rachel froze. But then, she forced a stiff smile. I don't understand what you're saying. The safe? I moved it to the company housing on the day of the incident. Her face lit up when I told her. Are you coming now? I'll come right now. Rachel's voice was lively, and I smirked. Upon arriving at the company housing, Rachel's attitude changed drastically, rubbing her forehead on the floor. I'm sorry, Kelly. Actually, Dan, from his sickbed, ordered me to look for the gold bars. He said they could be sold for money, so I was wandering around the ruins, trying to steal them amidst the chaos of the fire. But I didn't commit arson. Oh, you were looking for this, weren't you? I brought out a silver dial-type safe from the back of the room, and Rachel's eyes sparkled. She watched eagerly as I opened the safe. But all that emerged was a bundle of old letters. Letters my husband gave me before we got married. Good thing I kept them in the safe. Damn, just trash. So, where are the gold bars? In a bank safety deposit box. You're going to have to ask a master thief for that. What a waste of time. I'm leaving. As Rachel attempted to stand up, I gently told her. Don't be in such a hurry, the main event is just starting. What main event? Rachel's irritation was apparent as I flipped a large envelope, spilling a vast amount of photos onto the living room table. Rachel gasped and covered her mouth. No wonder, the photos showed her out at night, happily walking through nightlife districts arm in arm with a man, and entering nightclubs with bags from high-end brands. Rachel, I heard you were quite the delinquent back home. Did you research that too? Your hometown is where our second factory is located. You were quite the troublemaker, breaking shop signs and factory windows. That's in the past, I've forgotten about it. Rachel defiantly lifted her chin. Oh really? But these are recent. I laid out a few photos, tilting my head. Strange. You're a stay-at-home wife, right? Where's the money for these night outs coming from? Maybe Dan's card? Rachel, panicking, pleaded with me. Please, keep it a secret from Dan. If he finds out I've been using his card and even resorted to loan sharks, he'll definitely divorce me. So, you set the fire. Tried to burn me along with the house, how terrible. I said mockingly, and Rachel's face turned into a mask of rage, her voice shrill. Burning you was the quickest way. Either get the insurance money, or at least the sickness allowance if it fails. I mean, burning that old house was better. Living there was making me sick. A rebuild would have made your late husband happy, wouldn't it? I sneered. My patience is running thin. That house was rebuilt when Dan was born. After discussing with my husband, we decided on a traditional architecture that suited wedding ceremonies and rooms. You have no right to comment as a freeloader. Rachel's forehead vein bulged. I'm going to the restroom, don't leave just yet. I insisted and headed to the washroom. As soon as the bathroom door closed, a man's sharp voice rang out. Hey, what are you doing? Rushing back to the living room, I found Rachel being restrained by two men in suits. A bottle of pills rolled across the floor. Rachel attempted to drug Kelly's coffee with a sleep inducer. Rachel, you are under arrest for assault. What? Why are there detectives in the next room? Of course. Talking to an arsonist alone is too dangerous. I shrugged, and Rachel glared at me with piercing eyes. Can we take your earlier statement as a confession? I didn't say I set the fire. Then, let's discuss the other charges at the station. Other charges? Rachel looked bewildered, and I smiled at her. The mischief you got up to when you were 18. Remember breaking the factory windows? Oh, that pathetic factory. Our second factory. The broken window damaged an important machine, causing a week's shutdown and significant financial loss. I explained politely. Back then, we couldn't pinpoint the suspect, but thanks to the detectives' inquiries in Rachel's hometown this time, we could identify you as the culprit. I told Rachel, whose expression stiffened. All that over something from 10 years ago? We still claim damages. I said with a full smile. The total damage and compensation might be around $200,000. $200,000? I can't pay that amount. Rachel trembled, her face pale, as the detective handcuffed her. Rachel, you're under arrest for suspicion of assault. The detective declared as Rachel was led away, and I finally breathed a sigh of relief. The plan by Dan and his wife unfolded just as I had suspected. They went out to the mall as a family, setting a meet-up time with Anna to split up. Dan's unexpected departure to smoke a cigarette, which was actually to retrieve the gold bars from the house, was unforeseen by Rachel. She, following the plan, doused a stack of newspapers in the parking lot with kerosene and set it on fire. Dan, mistaking the execution day by a week, got caught in the act. Rachel, the perpetrator of the arson, faced charges for attempted murder by arson, drugging my coffee with a sleep inducer for assault, and the vandalism from 10 years ago. Eager for a quick settlement, I agreed on a $100,000 settlement to facilitate Rachel's social rehabilitation. Rachel, burdened with a massive debt of $320,000, including the unauthorized use of Dan's card amounting to $20,000, the settlement of $100,000, and the vandalism charge of $200,000, works tirelessly at our factory from dawn till dusk to pay it off monthly. She seems to be sobbing at work, saying it'll take a lifetime to pay off. Dan, who had conspired with Rachel planning to split my insurance money, was arrested after his discharge. We settled with a $100,000 payment, withdrawing the complaint and having him work at our factory. The harsh working conditions of hot summers and freezing winters must be tough for Dan, who used to switch jobs whenever he disliked something. However, after threatening him with the possibility of jail and the option to sue again, he quieted down. Despite Dan's fury over Rachel's misuse of his card, they lived together in the factory's company housing, arguing but not divorcing to avoid extra living costs. I bought a condo near Anna's elementary school with the fire insurance payout, and we began living together. Dan and Rachel, insisting on seeing Anna, have been pestering us, but since she wants to avoid them for now, their reunion seems to be on hold. The compensation from Rachel for the vandalism goes into the factory's funds. Despite being separated from her parents, Anna shows no sign of loneliness and goes to school cheerfully. When I'm busy, she cooks something, or even does the shopping for me. Living with my adorable granddaughter is more comfortable than I had imagined. I plan to continue overseeing the factory my husband left behind while living with my granddaughter. It was supposed to be our first trip in a long time, but I had to cancel because of some urgent work. I'll make it up to you later, I promise. Today was the day we had reserved to go to a luxury hotel as a couple's trip. Shaken by the call from Tom, I asked him why. But he was clearly acting strange and dodging the question. Thinking something must have happened, I immediately called our daughter Holly. So it's true then. All right, I'll handle it from here. Mom, just stay put at home. I'll get ready and head over soon. Okay, I'll be waiting. I've always felt something off about Tom's behavior. Tom, who had been strange since before he became the CEO in his early 30s. The distrust isn't easy to shake off, though it's natural for him to be at the company as its CEO. I called Tom again, urging him to come home soon. When Tom returned home in the morning, he apologized. What a foolish man. I thought to myself, then said, "Oh. Why don't you take a look behind you?" The moment Tom turned around and saw me and the person next to me, he went pale. My name is Juliana, a 45-year-old homemaker. Until 2 years ago, it was just my husband, our daughter, and me living together, but recently, Holly got married. Now that she's working, Holly and her husband live together, and it's just Tom and me at home. Thanks to Tom running a well-known company since his early 30s, we had no financial troubles when Holly was young. We used to go on trips often, just the three of us. Holly looked forward to these trips so much that she would make sure Tom made the reservations properly. Tom took care of all the payments for the hotel reservations. Even when I offered to pay, Tom insisted on doing it himself. We thanked each other and must have looked like a loving couple to anyone. I never forgot to be grateful, and I managed our finances well. But this story dates back to when Holly was a child. As Holly entered middle school, Tom's behavior began to change gradually. When I went to pick Holly up and returned home, Tom, who should have been there, was nowhere to be found. I tried calling him several times, but he never picked up. Sometimes, when he did come home, he would just play with his smartphone and fall asleep on the couch. And that's not all. He stopped contributing money to the household, which he had always done before. When Holly wanted to have a wedding ceremony, Tom dismissed it with a displeased look. When she mentioned wanting children, Tom negated it, assuming future hardships. We, as her parents, should have wanted to support her. But Tom wouldn't listen to Holly's opinions and just imposed his own, arms crossed. You're young, you and your husband should be able to cover it. What's with that attitude? That's so unfair to Holly. Just because they're young doesn't mean they can easily afford it. I stood up for Holly. But Tom just sneered with a snort, arms crossed. It's the truth, isn't it? She should be supporting us after all we've done to raise her. Not supporting her is just wrong, don't you think? My anger made no difference to Tom's opinion. Why all the negativity? The Tom I knew wouldn't have said such things. He used to be so supportive, even when Holly was born. When Holly was a baby, he said childcare should come before work. Maybe it was because many around us became stay-at-home moms, but Tom was kind not just to me but to Holly as well. Even with his busy job, he always came home to see Holly's sleeping face, finding solace in it. He prioritized love above all else, but what changed him? Just thinking about it gives me a headache, so I turned to exercising as a hobby for physical and mental relief. Tom's negativity shocked Holly. Speaking of the person in question, there were many times he hardly came home at all. During such a time, I got a call from Holly. Sorry, Mom. I don't want Dad to know, but I'm pregnant. I can't come home anymore, so I thought I'd tell you in advance. That's so, I'm relieved. I was afraid you had given up because of what your father said. Not at all. I've always said I wanted kids. I'll raise them right. Yeah, okay. Do your best, Holly. But don't overdo it, okay? Rely on others sometimes. Holly sounded happy as she replied, "Got it." I strongly felt that this was something I couldn't tell Tom. I thought it best to say nothing when he came back and just act as usual. Months passed since Tom stopped coming home. Then, I received a message from Holly with a photo attached. It was to announce the birth of her child. A cute child, looking just like Holly, appeared on the screen. How adorable. I'm so glad. Glad that mother and child are safe. As I was tearing up over these thoughts, Tom snatched my smartphone with a threatening tone. Having kids, huh? How can you say such horrible things? To your own daughter, no less. Isn't your grandchild precious to you? Give me back my phone. No way. I thought you and Holly were up to something, and it turns out I was right. Don't expect me to approve of her getting married now. Tom, who had just come back suddenly, began to deny Holly's personal life. I didn't understand why he was so stubborn, and I argued back. No parent doesn't support their own child. Maybe you should reconsider your position? And when exactly were you planning to work, being a homemaker all this time? I don't want to hear it from someone who hasn't lifted a finger even after her daughter became an adult. That stung. I was a homemaker because I was raising our child. I admit there's some truth to his point, but I still intend to stand by Holly. It's a fact that I couldn't stand Tom just complaining and then heading off to work without coming home properly. Being in my 40s, finding a job wasn't going to be easy. After discussing with Holly, I learned that upskilling is a trend in the job market these days. So, I decided to upgrade my skills to get a job. With the help of online courses, I finally acquired some skills. With Holly's support, I managed to start working from home after a long time. Tom made a strange face when he saw me working as usual. He seemed shocked, thinking I was still just a homemaker. I had never seen that expression on him before, and I couldn't help but laugh. This is good, right? Yeah, I guess. I never thought you'd actually work, so I'm surprised. Despite his criticism of not working, he still looked down on me. Why can he only speak in such a demeaning way? Just as I was about to retort, Tom made a suggestion. If you're working now, that means we can afford to stay at a luxury hotel. What is he talking about now? A luxury hotel, the one we talked about going to when we were newlyweds and hadn't been married long? Back then, traveling was my hobby. I had stayed in all the local hotels and wanted to go somewhere new. That's when we found out Holly was on the way, and I said I wanted to prioritize parenting. Since prioritizing parenting, the three of us never went together. My routine was housework, Tom was the CEO of a well-known company, and Holly went to school. I had forgotten for a while, but I finally remembered. Truth be told, I still want to go on a trip. I wanted a couple's trip at some point, so I'm honestly very happy. But seeing Tom's attitude now, I wonder if it's okay to go together. I had thought we could enjoy some good times as a couple, but even now, things are awkward. I decided to try making a suggestion to Tom. Just in case he had any objections, I wanted to leave the decision up to him. Want to go together? Don't you think it'd be nice for us to have some time together as a couple after so long? But what about the money? I can't prepare it right away, you know. Don't worry, I'll take care of it. Right, Tom is the CEO of a well-known company. I was so caught up in how poorly Tom was treating Holly, but he remembered the time we went on our honeymoon. Feeling excited inside, I decided to start preparing a week before the reservation date. It seemed like money wouldn't be a concern, but just in case, I decided to bring the money I earned from working from home. Then, on the day we were supposed to go to the luxury hotel, Tom called to say he suddenly had to work. It was supposed to be our first trip in a long time, but I have to cancel because of some urgent work. I'll make it up to you later, I promise. I was looking forward to it, but then Tom canceled on the day of the reservation. As I roughly pulled clothes out of the neatly packed carry-on bag, tears of frustration overflowed. Does he think he can just blame everything on work? Asking Tom for a reason only leads to him dodging the question, never consulting with me. I was looking forward to it, really. I don't understand that man. I muttered to myself and then cried out loud. After a while, I managed to compose myself. It's all right. I want more than just a marriage in name. I want a real relationship. I'll stop expecting us to be a cooperative couple. I called Holly's phone. Then, I heard Ken's voice over the phone. Holly and Ken were talking about something, but I couldn't make out the details. However, it seemed like Holly was panicking, and Ken was trying to keep calm, almost like they were arguing. It must be about that issue. It seemed like the result of a request I had made to Holly, and Ken was ready. And they said they needed to come over to our house urgently, as it required both Tom and me to be present. Before Holly and Ken arrived, I tried calling Tom's phone. As expected, it went straight to voicemail. Hearing the familiar voicemail message made me even more irritated. After calling several times, I finally got through to Tom. Today is Sunday. He left the house early in the morning and hadn't returned by the evening. Common reasons for divorce include debts or affairs. Despite a bad feeling, I questioned Tom. Today, Holly is coming over. Please come home soon. There's something important I need to talk to you about. Important talk? Wait, didn't I tell you I had urgent work and had to cancel the trip to the luxury hotel? Tom laughed as if he had the upper hand. It's hard to believe that a company with weekends off would work on Sunday. Especially when it's known as a good company. Implying good work-life balance. But listening to Tom's explanation, you'd think the company wasn't so good after all. I decided to share the information Ken had dug up about Tom. I've heard, but that's not the point. I was wondering if maybe you've gotten into debt. Debt? What are you basing that on? I don't understand. From your reaction, it seems true. If you don't come back, I'll throw away all your stuff. That's my offer. His voice was trembling. But after hearing what Holly and Ken had found, I didn't want to believe it. Yet, Tom's actions and the word debt seemed to connect correctly. It's natural for a wife to not want to believe such things. Don't throw away my stuff, please. No. If you don't face this, I'm considering divorce. Wait, okay. I'll apologize, just give me some time. I won't accept just an apology, show me through your actions. I'll be waiting at home. I hung up the phone, feeling my body shaking. It's always painful to be on the receiving end of unpleasant words, to always be the one to tolerate. Exhausted, I sat down at the entrance. Tom's company is supposed to have weekends off. And being the CEO, there shouldn't be any financial issues. Perhaps something was wrong between us as a couple. Even with these feelings, it wasn't my choice to live like this with Tom. As I was thinking this, Holly arrived. Seeing me sitting at the entrance, Holly looked worriedly at me. Mom, are you okay? Ken is here too. He's smarter than me, so when Dad arrives, let's get everything out in the open. Yeah. Sorry for showing you such a pathetic sight. Don't worry about it, it's okay. Plus, today, I was really hoping to eat your cooking, Mom. Do you think you're up for it? Can I help? Holly was considerate, offering to take over household chores for me. Becoming a mother, Holly. Oh, how desperately I lived as a mother. There were times I was so focused I couldn't see anything else, but I understand it was all to protect my child. For now, we prioritized cooking dinner together. I figured Tom would come back late at night or in the morning. While preparing dinner with Holly, I realized Ken hadn't shown up at all. Where's Ken? Ken said he'd wait outside because of Dad's issue. Plus, he didn't want to leave the kids alone, so he dropped them off at his parents' and then he's waiting in the car. Right, it's dangerous to leave a child alone. Yeah. Plus, we don't want to expose them to our parents' arguments, right? Ken and I want to live in peace." I was struck by her words, and Holly gave me a reassuring smile. Parents' arguments. Holly must have endured her share too. It made me feel complicated. Then, a notification popped up on my phone. It was a message from Tom, saying he'd be back tomorrow morning. "I'll let Ken know. We should get ready too." "Me too. But how about we all have a light meal first?" "Good idea." Until Tom arrived, Holly, Ken, and I gathered to eat together. Ken apologized for being late in greeting us. He was so considerate, it warmed my heart. Seeing the dishes on the table, Ken looked surprised. When I asked why, he laughed joyfully, saying my cooking was too gourmet for him. "And to think, a husband who doesn't eat these delicious meals every day, that's kind of sad, isn't it? I'm used to it, I guess. As long as Holly and you visit occasionally, that's enough for me." "That's good to hear. I feel ready to face your husband head on." "We've turned a blind eye to things. Thanks in advance for tomorrow morning, both of you," I said, and Holly and Ken replied in unison, "Yes." They looked at each other and burst into laughter. It's nice, their closeness. Honestly, I'm so envious of their relationship, it's almost jealousy. But the main issue is Tom's true intentions. The fact that the word debt shook him proves my intuition was right. And the information Holly and Ken gathered was accurate. That fact alone stuck in my mind, making me sad. After dinner and cleaning up, we held a strategy meeting for the next morning. To make sure everything went smoothly. To ensure Tom couldn't make excuses. I hated that Tom always wanted to appear as the good guy while staying safe himself. After the meeting, we decided to sleep in the same room. Waking up, I saw a message from Tom saying he'd be home soon. I shared the news with Holly and Ken, and we took our places as planned. I knew this wouldn't be the end, but the effort we put in was real. I have no regrets about ending our marital relationship. Yet, I couldn't help thinking if there was something more I could have done. If I had acted sooner, maybe we wouldn't have had to go through all this trouble. I would have blamed myself if not for Holly and Ken's comforting presence. I felt pathetic as both a parent and an individual. As I was lost in thought, Tom barged in. He immediately apologized loudly enough for the neighbors to hear. "I'm sorry, Juliana. I'll book a luxury hotel again, let's go together." It must have been his way of thinking. Unfortunately, it didn't resonate with me at all. Noticing the silence, he looked up, calling my name while searching the house. But I wasn't there. I was in the car with Holly and Ken. "Now's the time, Mom." "Right, let's do this." "Go for it, Mom." Encouraged by Holly, I stepped out of the car. As Tom was about to re-enter the house, I called out, "Hey, wait." He turned around in shock, making a strange noise. I took a deep breath before speaking. "Tom, we need to talk." "Talk? We can reschedule the trip some other time, can't we?" "Okay." "Then, why don't you take a look behind you?" "Behind?" As he turned, Tom saw Holly and Ken standing behind me. But his reaction to seeing Ken was one of fear. "You are?" "Long time no see. I'm married to Holly. You knew that, right?" "I'm aware of it." "Where did all that momentum go just now?" Ken, with a smile on his face, bowed and reached out for a handshake with Tom. But Tom, shaking off his hand, yelled with a face like a demon. "What happened to my request? You said the results would be quick, but there's been no word at all." "Oh, was that so? You seemed quite happy plotting your get-rich-quick schemes behind the scenes from dawn till dusk." "What's that supposed to mean? I haven't heard anything about it." "Of course, we've got evidence. Your mother was worried about you, but as Holly said, you're just a man after a quick fortune." And then, Ken, having somehow seized them earlier, pulled out several credit cards. Due to Tom's get-rich-quick schemes, the borrowed amount was so high that it was beyond repayment. "Let's end this. I can't see you fixing this. You should apologize to your mother first, like a man would." Tom muttered something under his breath with a face like the end of the world, but eventually, he slowly bowed his head. In a barely audible voice, Tom said, "I'm sorry." Thanks to Ken's efforts, a brilliant lawyer, Tom's debts came to light. I conveyed to Ken that living together any longer would be meaningless. Ken smiled and said, "Exactly," and proceeded with the paperwork. The detail was about reducing the debt on Tom's cards. However, I decided not to cooperate because I believe in taking responsibility, so I communicated that direction. Is divorce the right way to go? Yes, please. Understood. I will discuss it with Tom again after reviewing the divorce papers. May I act as your representative? Yes, thank you. Thank you as well. Having given permission for him to act as a representative, Ken also mentioned he would get consent from the person involved later. Meanwhile, Tom was doing a cleaning job. It seems Tom says the consequences of freely spending money as a CEO have caught up to him. Self-inflicted, yet he dares to complain. We decided to file for divorce after our final discussion. Until the very end, Tom kept whining, "I don't want to separate. Stop your futile resistance. I believe it's utterly wrong to ever cause trouble for others again. And instead of hiding and being exposed later, it's better to speak up when necessary. Money, while convenient, can also bring one's life crashing down." Afterward, Tom and I divorced. I started living alone, something I had always wanted, but it felt lonely after always living with someone. When Holly heard about it, she suggested living together. When I asked if she was sure, Holly gladly agreed. Greeted by Holly and Ken. And their little girl, born in the meantime. Her tiny hands grasped my fingers tightly. Pure, tearful eyes looked up at me, making me feel truly grateful. Seeing this, Holly and Ken smiled happily. "Mom, it's a surprise." "A surprise?" "Yes, feel my belly?" I felt a slight movement in Holly's belly. Looking up, I asked Holly, "A second one?" "Yes. It seems I was already pregnant when we started exposing Dad's debts." "That's great. I'm so happy to have the chance to care for a child again." "Yes. We're counting on you for a while, Mom." "Leave it to me." Holly stood smiling beside me. And Ken wanted to get in on the action, saying, "Of course, I'll help out too." It was rare for him to show defiance, and Holly laughed as if it was amusing. Ken is serious about work and now preparing for the second child with Holly. I can't be outdone by the young couple, so I decided to start yoga. As you age, maintaining physical strength becomes necessary. If I'm going to help raise my granddaughter, I need to be fit. Living day by day, especially being careful with money, we plan to live happily and support